And welcome to our live Your Voice, Your Future. I'm Armstrong Williams. Thank you so much for joining us. First, I attempted to watch the NBA All-Star game last night with a buddy of mine. I stopped watching the Pro Bowl. And then, you know, I started asking myself this, and maybe Andrew Donaldson and my guests can help me with this. I was wondering whether or not did the NBA All-Star game leave me behind, or did it abandon logic altogether? I literally sat there watching, trying to understand the format, the scoring, the flow of the game. East versus West is gone, captains drafting teams, target scores, mini tournaments, experimental endings. It felt less like basketball and more like a television lab experiment. And then there's, as I mentioned, the NFL Pro Bowl, now flag football, dodgeball, and obstacle courses. Listen, I get it. I get the reasoning. No player wants to risk injury in a meaningless exhibition, right? Careers are way too valuable. Contracts are too large. The stakes are simply aren't there, right? But here's the problem. And hear me. When you remove competition, you remove tension. When you remove tension, you remove meaning. Sports thrive on clarity, clear rules, clear structures, real stakes. The All-Star game and the Pro Bowl used to be about pride, conference versus conference. The best of the best competing, even if only for bragging rights. Now they feel like carefully packaged entertainment products designed to chase ratings and social media clips. Listen, I don't blame the players. I don't blame the league for wanting safety, but somewhere along the way, logic gave way to spectacle. And when fans like myself are left asking, what exactly am I watching? That's not nostalgic speaking. That's confusion born from constant reinvention without purpose. And maybe I'm old school. Maybe the game's changed more than we did. Where's the moral clarity? I mean, Andrew, I'm just confused. What is happening?
I think you hit on a very good point. When you have something that's carefully crafted entertainment, kind of the skill and the art form of carefully crafted entertainment is to make it not feel like carefully crafted entertainment. And when you have things like this going on where it's just more and more folks that have a whole lot of money and a whole lot of time on their hands in a very long season, you're going to have these sorts of things. And especially if you're old enough like me and you grew up on 90s basketball, which was way more physical, then you start putting some of the cultural stuff on top of it. Then you put on the fact that it's a longer season. Then you put on the style of play is way less physical, way more finesse to start with. You kind of have this perfect thing. But you hit on the most important part of all. It's not really understandable. You need to keep these things simple. The NFL does a great job of, if something doesn't make sense, they usually go in and fix it pretty quickly, pretty swiftly for the next thing. This is just an amalgamation of a lot of things where if you don't recognize it as what it's supposed to be and you don't carefully craft it to be entertainment but still be what you're advertising it to be, people get confused, people tune out, people don't like what they're seeing, and I think that's what you're getting at.
You know, I had not even planned to talk about this tonight, but I walked in the studio and Aideen, my senior producer for eons, said, "Did you watch the NBA All-Star game?" She said, "I was so confused." I said, "You know what? I gotta do something on that," because I felt the same way. So I had to bring it up. Okay, it's just crazy. I can't watch it anymore. But moving on, you know, Andrew, ICE agents are tasked with enforcing the rule of law when they are doing their jobs within constitutional and statutory bounds, and that must be respected. A nation cannot function if its laws are selectively enforced. But I think you and I agree that at the same time, the rule of law also requires transparency and accountability. And when force is used and when innocent lives are lost, and I know Schumer and those are arguing that they should wear body cameras, they should remove the mask, and I understand respect for law enforcement and accountability for misconduct are not contradictions. They are two pillars, actually, Andrew, of the same principle. Democrats call for reform and oversight. That is a legitimate in a constitutional republic, but reform, Andrew, must be substantive, not performative. If outrage becomes a midterm talking point, because that's what it feels like. Rather than a serious effort to fix policy failures, the public sees it and trust erodes even further. And so our president argues for strong border enforcement because he believes that securing the nation's borders is a core responsibility of the government, but enforcement must be targeted and proportional focus on criminal gangs and genuine threats to public safety, not policies so broad that they inflame communities and escalate tensions unnecessarily. And that's why we're seeing the president's numbers tanking among Latino voters. And then you got these protesters demanding answers and have every right to do so peacefully. That is a constitutional guarantee. But we must distinguish between sincere citizens seeking justice and those who exploit unrest for chaos. And peaceful protest, Andrew, strengthens democracy. Anarchy weakens it. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree, but these things don't happen in a vacuum. They've happened in a sequence of events, and it's been a bipartisan sequence of events across several different presidencies from both parties now. We have had mission creep with law enforcement in general. We didn't push back with local law enforcement getting MRAPs. We didn't push back with law enforcement dressing up like military. We haven't done a good job of keeping constitutional values, both parties, everybody, local, state, federal level, when it comes to law enforcement, and we haven't done a good job of keeping law enforcement accountable. But on the flip side of that, we've also not done a real good job of the citizenry respecting law enforcement in part of it. So all of that stew has been out there for a while, and it ferments, and then it pops up every so often. Right now it's popping up over ice. But that all happened in a sequence that got us to this point. Then you put the political stuff on top of it. Then you put in the fact that if you're going to cheer on for mass deportations, which has some leniency to it and has some immediacy to it, there's no way you're going to do that without a massive expansion of law enforcement. And then you get things like quickly trained people. Are these people the best people possible? Do you have people doing the job correctly? All those things go together, and then that's where the mistrust in government goes. They're like, well, the Democrats did it when they were in power. Now you got Republicans abusing things in power, and it just seems like whoever's in power doesn't want to reel in law enforcement. That's where you really break the trust of the public, and it's a fair criticism right now, and it puts the law enforcement officers that are on the streets in a bad place because now they're caught in the middle of all of it, and that's when you really get trouble. That's when you get violence. That's when you get people hurt, and you get a lot of the imaging that unfortunately we're seeing, and frankly, tragedies.
So let me mention this to you. Warships and fighter jets are flying over Israel and Iran, being tracked. Trump, in his braggadocious way, saying if they don't negotiate and come to the table, then they've got to be in place, prepared to do what they need to do, which gives some kind of indication that he's willing to launch some kind of military action against Iran. I don't see Iran as being any more of a threat than Russia is to Ukraine, and I don't see them having this same kind of military exercise in Russia because of what's going on in Ukraine. And yet, we know our people are there negotiating. Maybe Trump is using this as bluster to try to force their hand. Your perspective?
Yeah, it's all good points because the threat that Iran does pose is with their unconventional forces, their terrorism networks. We know after October 7th that they've really taken a beating. The Israelis have really diminished their capacity to project power through their terrorist proxies. So conventional military strikes, the question is, what good is that going to do? Are we trying to destabilize the mullahs and the government so that you can have some revolution and maybe bring some new government and the people of Iran who have long suffered under the Islamic despotism of the current mullahs? Can we get them some freedom and give them some self-choice? Well, that's hard to do with conventional warfare. Are we just projecting power? We did that with the nuclear strikes a while back, which is a legitimate target. The Israelis have hit that several times. Now we've hit them. We're threatening to hit them again. That's always going to be a legitimate target. You can do that with conventional weapons. But that point that you just brought up is what's the end goal? Because there's a lot going on in Iran right now that I don't know that a conventional military strike is really going to change the calculus all that much.
You know, it's really bizarre that Republicans and Democrats have unified and taken the president to task for attacking his allies. It's just bizarre. And then you have these strained U.S.-Europe ties. It's taken center stage at the Munich Security Conference that is going on right now. What is the end game here? What does he expect to gain? And I'm talking about this administration with these attacks.
I think it's fair. I think Secretary Rubio did a pretty good job of trying to walk the line of keep the boss happy, but also kind of maybe mend some fences. He had to say some things that was uncomfortable. But look, we've been friends with Europe for a long time. Friends can say uncomfortable things to each other. I think the bigger problem, besides just the bluster and rhetoric, because Europe is used to Donald Trump now. We've been doing this for 10 years, both with him out of office and threatening, and now back in office again. They're smart. They understand the rhetoric part. The part that they're having trouble with is there's inconsistency to it. Why does he talk about Greenland? Why does he bring that up? We know the security things, but they've said no, they're not going to do it. He keeps bringing it up. The NATO thing, yes, it's legitimate that NATO needs to pull their own weight and spend more money, but a lot of those countries have been doing that, but he hasn't changed the talking point. There's some consistency to foreign policy that the Trump administration, one and the current one, haven't been really good at. Not that the other administrations have been much better, but foreign policy needs consistency, and America is not great at consistency. That's a bigger problem than just the rhetoric, because they know we're going to have more elections. They know there's going to be more things coming up. If we can get that piece of it and get some consistency, they know what to work with. But right now, they don't know what's coming next, and that's not good for policy.
You know, I will tell you, the midterm elections are right around the corner. And I mentioned earlier about the numbers, and I've been speaking with people inside the White House, and they tell us they're more devastating than what we are aware of. Can Trump, by lowering his tone, not being so aggressive with deportations, helping and give Americans real relief where they are at the grocery stores and with their wallets, can he change this around in time so there won't be a bloodbath during the midterm elections?
Well, the key word there is bloodbath. Are you going to lose 10 to 15 seats, which is kind of average for par on a normal year? Are you going to lose 25 to 30, which would be catastrophic? Could you lose more and really have a historic tsunami tide? Those are the differences that are really going to matter, because we already have seen this movie. We know what's going to happen. If the Democrats get the House, which historically they should get and they are projected to get, it's going to be investigations, impeachment, grind everything to a halt, and that's all you're going to do for the next 2 years, the last 2 years of this administration. So that gets to be a different calculus if it's 10 or 15 seats. Is it a 5-seat majority, a 10-seat majority, a 20-seat majority? Can the Republicans hold the House? They should be able to, but is it a 1 or 2 seat advantage? Is it a 3 or 4 seat advantage? Those things really, really matter coming up in the day. This is going to be an economic election. Trump is not going to be at the top of the ticket. We already know there's a percentage of Trump voters that just do not come out if Donald Trump's not on the thing. The Republicans should be nervous. Should he turn down the rhetoric and focus on things like affordability? Yes, but again, there's that consistency word again. Can he stay on message on it? Can he do some things to do it, like stop fighting with Canada and maybe go ahead and get the USMCA redo and just get an easy economic layup that's just sitting there waiting? If you turn the rhetoric down, bring Carney down and shake his hand and say, let's make some money together. Things like that are easy wins if he could do it, but he would going to have to go back against the way he normally likes to do business. That's a big if, and it's going to be a very costly if to the GOP, I think.
And maybe he wants them annihilated. Who knows? But I don't think he understands what follows with impeachment hearings, going after his cabinet secretaries. I don't think he realized the chaos that would ensue if that happens.
No, well, and you are what you allow to happen sometimes,
yes,
too. So does he really care? And by the way, this was the knock that the Democratic Party had on Barack Obama at the end. They didn't think he did a good job of building the party up after her. And you look at their bench and how we got, you want to talk about how did you get Donald Trump? Well, the Barack Obama presidency didn't really build up the Democratic Party bench the way they thought and left them vulnerable to this. So it's a valid criticism. It's an old political criticism, having presidents that don't build up their party. And you do have a little bit of a thing of, does a Trump coalition exist without Trump? I don't think it does. I think you'll get 60-70% of that coalition, but you're going to have a group of that isn't going to come around without Trump. And I don't know that a Rubio or a J.D. Vance or anybody else is ready for that realization just yet.
Andrew Donaldson, it's good to see you and engage with you. You know, when we come back, Dr. Cate Shanahan is going to talk about what you need to know, the risk and rewards of vegetable oil. How dangerous is it to your health? We'll be back. We want to welcome back family physician Dr. Cate Shanahan back to the broadcast, author of Dark Calories, and also how vegetable oil destroys our health and how we can get it back. I mean, this has my attention as well. You know, seed oils are in nearly everything we eat. For years, we've been told they're healthy, but a growing number of experts say they may be fueling inflammation and chronic disease. Now, Dr. Shanahan is going to break down the science behind what she calls the hateful eight and what it means for your family's health. Dr. Shanahan, welcome back to the show, and the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. And yes, what seed oils mean for your family's health is a disaster. Really, truly, the most important thing that you can do for your health and your family's is to memorize the hateful eight seed oils, which I'm going to list out for you, and then start reading ingredients labels looking for these 8 oils. And you are going to find them, you know, in some disappointing and surprising things. For example, like dried blueberries.
Really? Dried blueberries?
Yes, they have antifungal properties because they are basically anti-life. And so they stick them onto dried fruits so that it doesn't grow fungus. It keeps it longer. Good for shelf life, bad for human life. But let's talk about the 8 that I want people to memorize. So to make it a little bit easier to remember, there's 3 C's and 3 S's to start with. So that's corn, canola, cottonseed. Then the 3 S's are soy, sunflower, safflower, then rice bran, and grapeseed. And since there's 8 of them, I call them the hateful 8. There's a lot of science that went into identifying these particular 8. A lot of people have asked me, well, what about peanut oil, or what about sesame oil or flax oil? Those are fundamentally different. Fundamentally different. These 8 oils are absolutely unique food substances. There is nothing else like them in the food supply. And in fact, 7 of the 8 were not introduced, were not even produced, grown, cultivated for human consumption. So for example, soybeans, right? Soy oil. A lot of folks, including myself, assume that they used like where they grew soy all throughout Asia for hundreds, thousands of years, they must have been using it for oil. No, they weren't. And in America, when they first started growing soy oil, what they used it for was machine lubricant. And that meant that it didn't have to be particularly it didn't have to be well refined. It didn't really matter how degraded the chemicals that the plant put in the seed would get. And because soy oil and the 7 of the other 8 are not they were not properly cultivated to yield the oil the way olive oils, which have been bred by humans, you know, for thousands of years, they yield their oil easily, but not so with the corn, canola, cottonseed, soy, and safflower, or the rice bran or grapeseed. The exception is sunflower oil, but even sunflower oil in this country is produced in a way that it chemically degrades in the bottle, it degrades in the food, and when it degrades, it turns into toxins, very potent toxins. And this is why I say that seed oils are the worst thing in the food supply, because there is nothing else that we eat that develops toxicity through the process of sitting on the shelf or cooking with it. There's nothing else like that that is halfway comparable. And the kinds of toxins that develop, there's so many toxins that develop, but the worst kinds are called aldehydes, like formaldehyde, like preservative. For, you know, dead people, it is truly disastrous that these oils that contain aldehydes, by the time we've cooked them and eat them, that they are not only in the food supply and that we're eating them, but they're actually promoted as healthy, so that many people will seek them out instead of things like butter, instead of things like lard and tallow that actually do have, a tradition of being healthy and being used. We used to eat them. Your grandmother ate it, your great great grandparents ate it, and they were healthy. They did not have all of the health problems when they were children that our children do today.
Can you just stop and name the hateful 8 seed oils again? Could you just name them?
Yes, this is very important. So
Yes,
it's corn,
corn,
canola, cottonseed, soy, sunflower, safflower, rice bran, and grapeseed.
Explain the corn and the grapes.
So corn, it doesn't seem very oily, does it? It actually takes quite a lot of corn to create just a little bit of corn oil. But what they do is they just squeeze it, and they heat it, and often they use a solvent that extracts the oil out. And so it doesn't taste like corn, the oil. It doesn't, have any color at all by the time it's done being refined. Doesn't look like corn. You wouldn't know the difference between corn oil, canola oil. You wouldn't know the difference between any of these oils because they are so distant from the seeds that they were extracted from. By the time they go through there's 42 steps involved in taking the crude oil, which is a dark, disgusting brown, acrid smelling that's squeezed right out of it. Taking that brown stuff has to be cleaned up before it's even considered edible. And that's why I say that there's nothing else in the food supply like this. There's nothing else in the food supply that is inedible and unsafe for consumption until it's, at any point, right? There's no other ingredient that is unsafe for consumption. It has to be extensively refined to be made even safe to consume.
So talk about, so I assume olive oil is just the best.
Olive oil is a very healthy oil.
Oh, good.
But I
Thank
can't
you.
say it's the best because there's so many.
Yeah, but it's healthy. That's all I care about. It's healthy.
Right, yeah. It's a good oil. There's other good oils.
So to balance this out, because listen, you really have me gripping. This is a gripping conversation. Other than olive oil, what other oils are safe? We got to balance this out, what people can actually use in their kitchen.
Literally anything that's not the hateful 8. So there's peanut oil, there is sesame oil, there's butter, right? Actually, that's my personal favorite. And I always keep a little bit of coconut oil around as well, which is another really healthy oil. And that together with sesame and peanut are my favorite 5. But there's a lot of other oils that people ask about. But
So
those are the main ones
what
that
does the data say about inflammation and a metabolic disease, and how did these oils become normalized, and are these government dietary guidelines part of the issue?
Yeah, the government guidelines are actually maybe the issue because the government started recommending them actually before there was any solid data. And in fact, one of the main medical organizations that everybody trusts in America, I'm not going to name any names, but one of these main organizations that focuses on heart health actually started promoting seed oils as healthy way back in the 50s and 60s before any single human trial was ever done. So to say that this is data, that there's data supporting that these oils are healthy is absolutely to misstate reality.
Well, who benefits pushing these oils? I mean, this oil and these liquid and the dangers to people's health. Who benefits?
Yeah, that's a really important question. The entire processed food industry benefits and the restaurant industry benefits because these oils are cheap and people want cheap food, right? I mean, so partly it's our belief that you can get the same quality for less money, right? Like that is something that is a wrong-headed belief when it comes to food. Unfortunately, that olive oil costs something like 10 times more than a giant vat of soy oil, right? And And yet we all want to believe that that's okay anyway, right? Like, just buy it. It can't be that bad. Well, it can be. And the people benefiting from this are making so much money that they're not going to change until we change our eating habits. So I already mentioned the processed food industry, just they would evaporate basically if there were no such thing as seed oils. Like if we just took away seed oils, the processed food industry would crumble, right, overnight. They totally depend on this stuff. But it's not just that. And I hate to say this, but the truth is that because these oils are so destructive to our health, the healthcare industry is thriving because we are eating them. And these two industries, the healthcare industry and the food industry together, they are they're like a behemoth, right? And so to say that they would have to give up these oils that are benefiting them in so many ways is just quite, that's going to change how we live our day-to-day lives, right? They're not going to do that easily. They're not going to give that up without a fight.
But it's
So,
lethal.
of course,
But if people are aware, you're talking about something that's very lethal to our health.
slowly but surely, it is lethal. That is the correct word. I mean,
Yeah.
people might think that's an extreme statement to make, but
Oh.
absolutely not. I mean, maybe it takes, 5 years before your child will develop asthma. But at age 5, that asthma that your child develops from living off of seed oils, unfortunately, it's the main supply. It's the 80% of the average American's fat calories come from seed oils. So a child of 5 that has been grown up on, seed oils from day one, because they are also in infant formula, would develop asthma, and that asthma can be fatal. So it is absolutely not a exaggeration to say that these oils are lethal.
I know we got to go, but just how addictive are they once you start, and what does it take to just break the cycle of unhealthy oils?
So seed oils actually make us addicted to sugar. And I describe this connection that I've sort of unraveled, this really important connection between how seed oils in our diet, which have no flavor and are not sweet, how is it that they could possibly make us addicted to sugar? And I describe this in chapter 3 of my latest book called Dark Calories. And this is a hypothesis that I have published now in peer-reviewed literature. It's gotten excellent reviews. There's been thousands of academics who have read it, and it has been, no one's really attacked it. And what I'm saying is that seed oils make us more susceptible to craving soda, to craving sweets. And when we get them out of our diets, it doesn't just protect our health in the future, it changes our relationship with food, and it enables us to actually stop craving sugar in this out of control way. I want to tell you one more thing before we go, and I talk about this in chapter 4 too, if you want more information in chapter 4 of Dark Calories. Seed oils actually make us hangry. The way they change our metabolism causes our cells to not use our body fat for energy. And so our blood sugar drops and we become hangry. When I was growing up, hangry really wasn't a thing. Nobody said they were ever hangry. And kids could go outside and play, come on in, say, hey, what's for dinner? I'm hungry. And mom would say, no, we can't have a snack. Dinner's almost ready. You're going to spoil your appetite. Go back outside and play. And they wouldn't melt down. Right? So hangry wasn't a thing. And what I'm saying is that having seed oils in your diet or your child's diet is making you and your children into sugar addicts or carbohydrate addicts in a way that medical science does not appreciate or understand. But once they come to understand and accept this, it will completely revolutionize the treatment of diabetes and food addictions and eating disorders and obesity.
And mix that with sugary drinks, mix that with alcohol, and then you mix that with the oil. It is explosive on the body.
100%, absolutely.
100%. It's like something nuclear.
It is. I say that, I call vegetable oils, I say, like, if you could walk down the grocery aisle with a Geiger counter that would detect toxins, Once you walk down the aisle where they sell all those bottles of vegetable oil, that Geiger counter would explode. It would just go from dit to brrr, and it would get even louder when you go down the aisle with the snack chips, the potato chips, and the crackers, and all the junk food that we know is bad for us. But it would even make noise. That Geiger counter would go off in the frozen dinner aisle, like with stuff that's supposed to be healthy. The main, like lean cuisine and entrees that are supposed to be healthy, even they call themselves healthy choice, there are seed oils in that.
You know, I could talk to you until tomorrow, and it would not be enough time. That's just how fascinating and what an eye-opener it is if you care about your health. Look, Dr. Shanahan, thank you so much for joining us. I look so forward to having you on again. When we return, Tony Lyons will be joining us here on Your Voice, Your Future.
It is easier to build up strong children than to try and repair broken men.
The streets are plagued with crime, violence. There's a lot of poverty, and it's all a result of lack of education that's happening in our schools. So it really is a crisis.
We come from very different political perspectives, but we've come to the same conclusion, and that is there is a crisis in the classroom. Children are being deprived of quality of life because they're being deprived of a good education. We must solve this problem. It's incumbent upon all of us to join hands together to get this done.
We can't afford to wait one more day before we address these issues, because every day we lose another child.
Let's stop the politicking. Let's stop the games. Let's really do something to give these kids a real chance at life and being a part of that American dream.
We need accountability for funding. Many of the districts where you're seeing very low test scores, students graduating with very low literacy and math comprehension rates, they are receiving a lot of funding. So where is the money going where our kids aren't being adequately educated?
If you believe every child is deserving of a quality education, please go to educationjusticefoundation.com. You know, now Tony Lyons is my brother, okay? And, you know, he publishes my books, and just someone I have a lot of respect for, character, values, and deserving of trust. And I'm so happy to have him on. He's the co-founder and co-chairman of the board of American Values in the 2024, and president and publisher of Skyhorse Publishing, one of the best publishing houses on the planet. And let me welcome my brother to the broadcast because I know he's busy. You know, look, my man, is MAHA becoming a political movement, or is it staying cultural?
I think MAHA is definitely a political movement. It's a social movement. It's a cultural movement. And, you know, there have been just incredible victories that affect everybody's life in America, that we have healthier food, we have healthier medical products. We are heading in the right direction, and it's going a long way towards ending the chronic disease crisis in this country that's been going on for about 40 years. And it just has to end now. That's what the president wants. That's what Secretary Kennedy wants. And it's certainly what I want.
You know, I don't know if people realize this or not. All our segments that has been going on for some time now, where on every Monday night we do a segment on Making America Healthy Again. It started with you when you brought the idea to me. I never realized how it would revolutionize people's eating habits, what they buy at the grocery store, and even just listening to Dr. Shanahan talk about the 8 hateful oils. There's so much that even the intellectual class, we have no idea what's going on with our food, the ingredients, and man, what a blessing that we have this segment every Monday night. You know, how organized is the movement heading into the midterms, and what voter blocks are responding most strongly, Tony?
Well, you know, the undecided voters are something like 12 to 14% of the vote. And those voters skew really heavily towards MAHA questions, MAHA problems, things that we're working actively to solve. And, you know, generally 95% of the public wants healthier food for their kids. They want fewer toxins in all products. They want fewer drugs for their kids. They want to be able also to trust the government. And they're feeling that for the first time in the last generation, government agencies are becoming less captured. And that, people from companies, from all kinds of companies, are saying they can't count on the government to support them. And what that means is that the government is supporting families and children and not just responding to these big corporations who they've worked for the last 50 years.
Let's talk about your own transformation. Before you started MAHA, what you knew about these ingredients, you were publishing, you published a lot of health books, but obviously I'm sure this has been something that has sort of been like even a renaissance for you in your own life. Talk about the transformation for you from where you started to where you are now.
Yeah, I mean, it started for me about 15 years ago when I first met Bobby Kennedy. And when I started publishing his books, and I published all of his books over those years, and there have been, something like 12 books. And, many of them have been big bestsellers. The Real Anthony Fauci sold 1.4 million copies. But what I learned in that process is that you can have a writer, a character, a person like Secretary Kennedy, who has just incredible integrity, who works day and night to get to the truth, to get to gold standard science, who fact checks everything over all these years, staying up till midnight, 7 days a week while he's working on a book. And I was talking to him much of that time. And I could see he was so dedicated, not to try to get more power, not to get more famous, not to get more money, but because he really cared about protecting children and adults throughout this country. And to see him get attacked over all those years told me a story and made me begin to question everything. And that's what I think every American has to do, is question everything, question all the things that you've been told, because they've led us to this point where so many of our children and so many of all of us are sick. We're the sickest people on the planet, even though we spend 2.5 times the money. And there's only one way that can be happening.
So is distrust of federal health agencies driving this turnout, driving this passion?
I think there's incredible distrust of what these companies or what these companies did to capture our government agencies. And, what's happened is that suddenly these agencies are no longer captured. So they are now working for the public. And I think that it's been such a widespread response that so many people see that we're heading in the right direction. Many people want it to happen faster. People always want it to happen faster. I would like it to happen faster. But the point is, we've got so much progress, and it's the first turnaround in a generation.
But so how does MAHA differ from traditional party platforms? And could MAHA influence primary elections before the general?
Yeah, just to put it into context, I mean, we are here to support the president and Secretary Kennedy and the incredible coalition that they've built. And we feel that that's a gift not only to the public in general, that so many government officials in the past have kind of lied their way to the top, failed their way to the top. And we are now in this position where we want to work with the administration to actually make progress. So our midterm strategy, and just to clarify that, we really want to make sure that Secretary Kennedy can complete the job that he started. And the only way that's possible is if Republicans win in the midterms. So we want to educate Republican candidates and teach them that if they learn and can message correctly, they can do better.
Are you saying that only Republican candidates are capable of this messaging?
I think that the problem with the Democratic Party is that we've seen that they are not willing to support progress, not against seed oils or food colorings or changes to the SNAP program so that people can't spend taxpayer dollars on candy and soda. They're not willing to support any of that. Whatever this president does, whatever Secretary Kennedy does, they attack him. So they are on the side of continuing the status quo, of continuing the corruption, and of continuing a system that the American public doesn't trust, doesn't believe in, and doesn't want.
So is this a short shelf life for what you're doing, or is it a long-term realignment?
This is a long-term realignment in the sense that the American public overwhelmingly wants harmful toxins out of their food. They wanted, fewer pesticides. They want to stop the over-medicalization of children. So they want to have the possibility of having healthy children. And they recognize, and they've read this, the stats on this, that 77% of children wouldn't qualify for military service. I mean, these are people who, on a large scale, their children bringing pill boxes to school, their children eating donuts and candy and cake and soda at school. We can do better. All around the world, people do better. We should be the leader, not at the end of all of these stats.
Now, finally, before Jeff Louderback from the Epoch Times join us, how can people become a part of Make America Healthy Again, Tony?
Yeah, so I would think that, the main thing is that they should go to our website, mahaaction.com. They should read the MAHA report on Substack. They should follow us on social media. I mean, we are working day and night. We have an incredible team of mostly volunteers, and we're looking for as many volunteers as we can find. And we just want to go up against all of these people who've lied to and poisoned the American public, poisoned our children, and get this problem solved and end the chronic disease epidemic in this country. And we think it's possible.
Tony Lyons, thank you so much for joining us. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you, Armstrong.
When we return, Jeff Louderback will be joining us. He's with the Epoch Times to talk about regenerative farming. Don't go away.
As a home buyer, you need a lender who cares about your home ownership dreams. United Security Financial has been helping families secure their dream homes for 30 years. We're a national fair practice lender that provides affordable mortgages and low down payment programs to eligible home buyers. To learn how United Security Financial can help you secure your dream home, call 1-800-373-4186.
And welcome back. Covering the MAHA movement didn't just inform our next guest, Jeff Louderback, it changed him. After reporting on the health debate, he made major lifestyle changes, and guess what? The man lost 65 pounds. Tonight, he's here to share what worked and what he learned. Jeff Louderback, reporter, Epoch Times, covers the MAHA movement and regenerative farming. Tell us your story. You lost 65 pounds?
Yeah, it's quite remarkable. I've, even though I think I'm 37 still, I'm 57, and most of my adult life, I'm about 6'4" and a little over 6'4". Most of my adult life, I've been where I am now. I've got down to about 215. But for a few years, well, actually about 5 years around COVID, I started gaining weight, and I was up to 278. So I was almost big enough to be an offensive lineman, but didn't want to be that way. So last May, I decided to do something about it, and it had everything to do with covering the Make America Healthy Again movement, and before that, for the Epoch Times, the RFK Jr. presidential campaign.
So you have to tell us, what is it that you changed that you did not have the discipline to do before, or you were not aware of what you were intaking was causing your weight to continue to surge? Just give us a little roadmap of what you had to change.
Well, it has to do with willpower and discipline. I've been athletic most of my life, and in my 20s, 30s, 40s, played a lot of basketball and recreational leagues and played amateur baseball, and would work out. And I had periods of time where I'd gain weight and lose weight, eat like crap, but you know, when you get, especially above 50, that's you start to notice things that you don't. Your metabolism tends to slow down. So
let me help you out. Just give us the first 3 changes you made, and how long did it take you to lose the 65 pounds?
okay, well, back in late May, I decided to quit processed foods cold turkey because I knew that was the issue. I was eating a lot. I was eating on the go, doing a lot of travel. You know, in the media, you do a lot of travel, and so I was eating out. I cut out eating out for the most part. I cut out processed foods. I focused on whole foods and herbs and got rid of fast foods, processed foods, and minimized sugar. Those are the main changes. I didn't do anything arduous like go to the gym an hour a day. I really did a lot of walking, a lot of hiking, and it was mostly dietary and incorporating what I learned from covering the Make America Healthy Again movement.
Is there more you would like to do?
Oh yeah, I've gotten to a stage where I'm down to, I hover between 210 and 215, and my next stage now, I'm doing a lot of high intensity interval training, doing more weight training, but I want to get to a level where I add more muscle tone and muscle mass because obviously after 50, it's harder to do. But I want to stay where I am now. It feels good to feel good again. And so it's just building upon that.
So what is it like covering the MAHA movement? Give us some insights, what people don't get to see and witness, and the euphoria it is built. Because if you have a testimony like yours, if people are seeing this transformation in their health and they go to the doctor, they get a better report. The doctor says, keep doing what you're doing, whatever that is, it's working. Obviously, that's the only affirmation you need.
Yeah, well, it was a process for me because I knew what I needed to do, but I wasn't doing it. And I joked, wrote an article about my personal story and joked that I went to over 28, or about 25, 28 states covering RFK Jr. I joked that I heard his speech so much that I could deliver it for him. Not as eloquently because he's a great public speaker, but I knew what I needed to be doing. He talked about eliminating processed foods and whole foods and herbs. And I knew a lot about that beforehand, but I was motivated to do it this time. And it had a lot to do with my faith. I renewed my Christian faith, and you know, it's important in the Bible to focus on taking care of your body. Your body's your temple. I hadn't been doing that, and it was all my responsibility. It reaches a point you have to just take responsible or personal responsibility and accountability and show the willpower, discipline, and implement what you learn.
Well, what has improved most in your life beyond weight, and what would you tell someone watching who feels overwhelmed and they just cannot find the routine to just deploy this in consistency?
Well, I'm a big sports fan, and I use a lot of sports analogies, and I talk about give yourself a season, which obviously technically a season is 3 months. So when you're, you know, you can see in my background, I'm a Red Sox fan, and say the Red Sox are on a losing streak, and you can't break that streak until you get a win. And you don't have a winning streak and some momentum until you win a second game, a third game, maybe a fourth game. The same applies to wellness and fitness. Really, your faith as well. When you know you turn your faith around and get into good habits that way. So I recommend people realizing you're not going to lose the weight you've gained, the fat you've gained overnight because you didn't gain it overnight. So it's just giving yourself some grace and getting willpower and discipline and turning a week into 2 weeks, 2 weeks into a month. And after a season, 3 months, if you cut out processed foods, eating out, minimize sugar, focus on whole foods and herbs, the new food pyramid. I've been cooking a lot at home from the MAHA cookbook. Do that, and you know, you don't even have to go. It's not about going to the gym an hour a day. It's focusing on your wellness and your nutrition.
You know, you can see the peace and the real self-esteem and self-worth you have built for yourself since you started this in your life. You know, what are the challenges now going forward?
Well, it's just not falling back into bad habits. And I think, again, I think my faith propels me because I keep on growing in my faith. And MAHA, the Make America, writing about it, living it. I live down here in the Appalachian foothills of Southern Ohio. You're looking at a guy who hadn't even grown a vegetable in his life until 2 years ago. Now I'm growing microgreens, learning how to make oregano oil, habits like that. So it's maintaining that. And I find, because, you know, I write a lot about the Make America Healthy Again movement, from issues and personalities to regenerative farming. I am part of a 501c3 down here. We address food insecurity, which is big down here in the Appalachian foothills of Southern Ohio. We're getting involved in growing produce regeneratively to give to people in need. So it's continuing those habits, those healthy habits, and immersing myself in everything MAHA, Make America Healthy Again.
Well, listen, I cannot thank you for sharing your story. You know, in about 10 seconds, what do you think is what is most misrepresented about the MAHA movement?
Well, that it's unsustainable. I mean, the MAHA movement has been around for years, even before RFK Jr. coined the term, and it's sustainable if you do what he talks about, as far as especially the processed foods, eliminating processed foods, and growing regeneratively and eating whole foods.
Well, listen, thank you and all our guests tonight for joining us. I'm Armstrong Williams.